Hegseth, the defense secretary, continues to claim no classified information was shared. Let's put up a post he put on X, formerly known as Twitter. He says, so let me get this straight. The Atlantic released the so-called war plans, and those plans include no names, no targets, no locations, no units, no routes, no sources, no methods, and no classified information. But based on the latest chain of messages we've gotten released by The Atlantic, there's an extraordinary level of detail, including the time of the strikes and the type of weaponry that was involved. How can this administration continue to argue that this was not classified? And even if it was not classified, should it have been classified?
The phrase I kept hearing on Capitol Hill today as the hearings were taking place and, high-level intel officials were there to face the music, almost, if you will, they continued to use the phrase highly sensitive information. Now, if those details weren't part of a war plan, I don't know what is. And that's the thing about this, is that the American public typically never gets to see such detailed operational planning from the military front, especially not until many days, weeks, months later, even years. This kind of thing has just never made it out to the American public. So it is a very stunning moment, especially in the response to it, I think, has been even more stunning. Instead of admitting and sort of moving on and saying, look, this is a mistake that won't be made again, the National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, as well as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, have doubled down. It was their assassinations on the character of journalist Jeffrey Goldberg that led to even more texts being released. It did not have to be this way, but it was a response, again, of two men that led to it. And I believe those two men really ought to be facing the music themselves in the form of a firing.
Yeah, and no one has really explained as to why no one on this group chat noticed that Jeffrey Goldberg was even on there, why no one raised a red flag, which is another question no one has answered. What do you think is the likelihood of anyone actually being fired, which is what you're saying should happen?
Well, in Trump's first term, he became famous for the Friday night purges he would do. They were almost nightmarish scenarios in which he would fire somebody, and we'd all hear about it on a Friday night. So, look, the week's not over, and as the story has legs and continues to evolve, rather devolve, I should say, it could result in a last-minute firing. Is Trump really that different from Trump 1.0? In some ways he is. This is about his legacy now. He doesn't want egg on his face. And I think this moment makes him look quite weak because he was not in the group chat. And typically for anything war related, the commander-in-chief, our president of the United States, as well as our Congress, should be advised and should affirm plans. This was all very fast moving, the group chat was. So it's easy to believe that other people in the chat, there were nearly 20 people in the chat, other people may not have noticed. It could be that maybe somebody by the same name was supposed to be part of the chat. We don't know that. Maybe he inadvertently added somebody when he meant to add somebody with the first name starting with J.E., for example. We, again, do not know these details, but it could really result in Trump saying no more.
Yeah, while we don't have a lot of details, Rinah, we do know, or perhaps you can shed some light on this, how this would have been any different, how this would have played out if it was a Democratic administration behind this blunder.
Right now, there are several clever quips being made across Washington, D.C., and have been since the news of this broke from Jeffrey Goldberg himself, that this is a scenario that is even worse than what Hillary Clinton did with classified information with her private server and those emails that we all remember quite well. The phrase from the Democrats love to bring up is that, what about those emails? I'm paraphrasing, of course, though. But this is a very different scenario. This was a fast-moving, again, discussion discussion that should have been held in a secure, classified information area. And those areas are pretty routinely set up for high-level administration officials, for members of Congress. I myself, as a former senior aide to members of Congress, have been permitted and given access to secure classified information areas, but after jumping through many hoops. So I just want to make sure the audience knows that all of this is very unconventional, and we cannot compare it to any other scenario.
And finally, Rinah, Republicans like Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, he says most Americans don't care about this. He says what they care about is the price of food, the price of gas. He says this security breach, majority of Americans in this country, according to him, don't care. Do you agree with him?
I take some issue with that statement because it's too easy. It's intellectually lazy to say, well, the general public writ large doesn't care about this. The general public writ large is unplugged from Washington. People are out working their jobs. They're not looking at their phones constantly, despite getting news alerts. They're not having the TV on 24/7. People are busy. And so it might take some days for more people to come to know about this. And it is a fast-moving story as well. So I don't agree fully with the senator, but I do think there is a glimmer of truth there. And it is that most Americans really just want to see the end result. They want to see lower prices on the shelf. They want to see how their daily life is impacted by this. It's a little far and away to say we are now, as Americans, less safe because of this security breach, this mistaken addition of a journalist to a high-level classified group chat. It is hard for most people to make that connection. And so, in general, I do think the senator has a point, but I don't fully agree. I think a lot of people will be scratching their heads and saying this mistake could have been avoided, and somebody ought to pay the price, because frankly, a junior staffer would have been fired for this. So why not the top heads that made this mistake? I think it would set a good example for President Trump to do so.
All right, we'll leave it there. Rinah Shah, thank you.
Thank you.